siguiente estación es King Memorial. Exit here for the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic District and Oakland Cemetery.
Hi, my name is Craig from the Gwinnett County Public Library, and today I'm going to take you on a tour of the historic Oakland Cemetery, located about 1 mile east of downtown Atlanta. In 1850, Atlanta leaders oversaw the purchase of 6 acres of land on what was then the outskirts of the young city, creating what was called Atlanta Graveyard. These first 6 acres, located in the southwest corner of the site, would expand to 48 by the time the site was renamed Oakland Cemetery in 1872. Between the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many of Oakland's most notable features were added, including Bell Tower and the cemetery's detailed brick walls and gates. The city's rapid growth from the early to mid-20th century transformed the neighborhoods around Oakland, adding many new residents and businesses. Unfortunately, the cemetery entered a state of decline for many years in the mid to late 20th century. Budgetary shortfalls made it difficult for the city to properly maintain Oakland. However, Oakland's fortunes began to reverse in 1976, when it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Also in 1976, a group of leading Atlantans created Historic Oakland Cemetery Incorporated, now operating as the Historic Oakland Foundation. This group rallied around preserving and improving the park. Today, Oakland Cemetery stands as one of Atlanta's most beautiful green spaces and historic treasures. More than 70,000 people have been interred at Oakland Cemetery. Some are unknown, and some are known the world over. And many are the men and women who shaped the city. Let's begin our tour in what's known as the original 6 acres. The oldest graves are found in this part of the cemetery, with the earliest dating to 1850. This was also the site of the original public grounds, which contained many unmarked graves. To the east of the original 6 acres are the Confederate burial grounds, the site of approximately 7,000 Confederate soldiers. Perhaps the most recognizable features of this section of the cemetery are the Lion of Atlanta and the obelisk, both commissioned shortly after the Civil War to commemorate the Confederate dead. The lion is a very large marble structure originally carved to commemorate unknown Confederate soldiers who died in the Battle of Atlanta. Upon completion in 1874, the obelisk was the tallest structure in Atlanta and remains the tallest structure in Oakland Cemetery. The city has recently added markers to contextualize these monuments with modern information about racism. Scrutiny of both structures has continued, particularly in the protests following the death of George Floyd in May 2020. Immediately south of the Confederate grounds, extending to the southern border along Memorial Drive, are the 2 sections that comprise the Jewish grounds, Jewish Hill and Jewish Flat. The more ornate gravesites of the older Jewish Hill reflect the merger of German Jewish and Victorian cultures in the late 19th century. The later development of Jewish Flat reflected a Russian Jewish burial tradition that resulted in tightly packed grave sites with no aisles through which to walk. Following the end of the Civil War, Atlanta expanded the cemetery with a 24-acre acquisition, an amount equal to half of its final size. A large portion of this land in the southeastern corner of Oakland became known as East Hill. It's the last section of the cemetery to be developed. It also features a unique piece of architecture: a bathroom. Built in 1908, the Women's Comfort Station also served as a place to seek temporary reprieve from the sun or inclement weather. It's one of two buildings of its kind remaining in Atlanta, both of which are in Oakland. A similar, yet-to-be refurbished building for men sits elsewhere in the park. State-of-the-art at the time of its construction, and notable for its intricately tiled floors and walls, marble interiors, and finely detailed exterior, it sat empty and derelict for decades. However, a 2019 restoration transformed it into exhibit space for rotating panels on Atlanta history. If we proceed just north of East Hill, we come into Potter's Field. Today, it's a rolling 6-acre green space. Those interred here were many of Atlanta's poorest citizens. Unfortunately, many of them are unknown because grave markers were lost or deteriorated over time. Unlike other parts of Oakland, they were made from wood and not stone. However, the city has tried to memorialize them. Also of interest in Potter's Field is a granite swale that was built to mitigate flooding in the park. Potter's Field surrounds the African American grounds. Unsurprisingly, since Oakland predates the Civil War, African Americans were legally required to be buried in separate sections of the cemetery. Not long after Oakland was established, when the property was still the original 6 acres, the city decided that slaves were to be buried in the easternmost portion of the property, in what became known as Slave Square. Even after the Civil War, the law still required African Americans to be buried in the most eastern portion of the cemetery. As Oakland grew, this meant the exhumation of some of those already buried to what today is the African American grounds. The lone mausoleum in this section belongs to Antoine Graves, a prominent businessman and school principal who's credited for brokering the sale of the land on which the Georgia Capitol building sits. We're going to walk just west from the African American grounds to what's called Greenhouse Valley. In the late 19th and into the 20th centuries, cemeteries would have greenhouses to produce the flowers used to tend the grounds and the grave sites. Oakland once had 3 such greenhouses, all constructed between 1870 and 1900. Unfortunately, they have not survived fully intact. However, in 2015, the Buckhead Men's Garden Club donated its modern aluminum and glass greenhouse to Oakland. The structure once sat at the Atlanta History Center, but was moved to make room for the center's acquisition of the cyclorama. The new greenhouse sits within the remains of one of the originals. Like the original, it's used to produce plants used on the cemetery grounds and occasionally used for private events. Nearby are a former steam plant and hayloft. If we continue west, we arrive in Bell Tower Ridge, so named for the turn of the 20th century building used as a chapel, residence, and office for the cemetery sexton. This beautiful and well-preserved structure is still used as the office for the sexton, and it's where the Visitors Center is currently housed. Because it sits at the highest point in the park, this section offers sweeping views of the city. It's here that you'll also find Oakland's most elaborate mausoleums, belonging to members of prominent Atlanta families. Atlanta owns a reputation as a city in a forest, and a visit to Oakland will remind you why. There's an abundance of mature trees throughout the grounds, and some are at least as old as the park itself. Oakland fell victim to the 2008 tornado that cut through downtown Atlanta, and it lost many of its mature trees. However, in the decades since, Oakland has given considerable attention to maintaining and growing its impressive collection of trees through its arboretum. And the goal is to replenish what was lost to the tornado and prevent further loss due to urban stress and drought. The grounds of Oakland Cemetery remain open even during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Bell Tower Visitor Center is currently closed, and guided tours are not available at this time. However, you can purchase an inexpensive, downloadable self-guided tour map at the Oakland website. There is no fee to enter the park. A small parking lot is available near the western entrance on Oakland Avenue, as well as street parking. The King Memorial MARTA station is a short walk away if you arrive by train. To learn more about Oakland Cemetery, visit their website, as well as the Digital Library of Georgia and New Georgia Encyclopedia, both of which can be found on Gwinnett County Public Library's Digital Resources page. So thank you for coming along with me today. Enjoy your visit and stay safe.